It's time to feed my sourdough starters. We're going to talk about what I'm doing because someone on my Foodalicious Facebook page is asking me questions. She's not having as much success with her starter growing as I am. You can see that there's fruit in a bowl, right? Like not very far away from where I started my starter, and I've been keeping it. Also, you can see I have two of them. So about a week into getting my starter, we're now almost 2 weeks in, I got a second starter from someone who had had it for 6 years. Placing it in close proximity to my starter definitely helped, because what happens is the yeasts will jump over things, they cross-pollinate. As long as you're feeding them separately, yes, this starter is now going to be different. It's going to grow in a different direction than if I had kept it sequestered. But that doesn't concern me because my goal is just to make really delicious tasting bread. This one is a rye starter. I'm continuing to occasionally feed it with rye flour. This one is a wheat starter, which I started with wheat. I occasionally feed it with whole wheat flour. But the most important thing is that I'm keeping it near that fruit bowl, which the yeasts, the wild yeasts, are going to jump off of there. And so it's not just the yeasts that are in the air that are helping my starters to grow, but we also want to show you what healthy starters look like. I'm going to grab a fork because that's probably about the best way to do this. I was using a whisk, but it's kind of hard on your whisk. It's really probably better to do it with a fork or a wooden spoon, a chopstick, or anything. You can see as I'm mixing this, you're going to see this starter dropping down. That shows you that it's rising. It was bigger. And we're going to do that with the other one too. We're going to show you that when I mix it, you're seeing it drop down. That's the gases being released. When I feed them, the first thing I do is I stir them up. And then I'm going to take out a half a cup of the starter. I'm going to put in about 90 milliliters of water. That's the method I've been using. It's the one that was from the recipe that I first read. I'm basically keeping my starters a consistent size by either taking out a half a cup and putting in a half a cup, or taking out a full cup and putting in a full cup. There's a better way to do it, and eventually I'm going to change over to this method, which is instead of focusing on how much I'm taking out, you focus on how much you are keeping, and you just weigh that, and you just weigh it and you want to keep about 4 ounces. And then the recipe for that method is found on the King Arthur Flour website. They're starting a starter recipe. The recipe I used was a bit different, and it's the one I started with. I started with whole wheat flour and water. I'm going to show you some of the flours I'm using. This is the flour that I started my starter with. That is what I started that starter right there with. I used it once, and then I went over to multi-purpose flour. Okay? And in the beginning, I didn't really notice, but I bought this unbleached flour. I bought this bleached flour. You can see it says on there that it's bleached. It says right there, bleached. That's not what you want. Yes, it worked, but that slowed my starter down. When I went back to the grocery store, I was able to get this unbleached King Arthur. You can see I got rubber bands around my flour to keep it from spilling. And that's what I've been feeding my starters with primarily. I'm now using the bleached flour just to make the loaves of bread. Hopefully I'll be able to get more of that King Arthur at one of the grocery stores that I went to the other day. They were out. I probably should have bought more bags when I was there. I only bought 2 bags. Amazing how fast you go through flour if you're making a lot of bread. I'm also using Bob's Red Mill. This is a pastry flour. It's not ideal for bread baking, I don't think. So I'm not using a lot of it in my breads. I used a little bit, but it's great for feeding my starters. It's probably just about perfect. And so I'm mixing my flours up a little. And again, I'm occasionally putting the whole wheat in this one. I have here some rye flour. I wasn't able to find it prepackaged. I was able to get it in the bulk section of one of my favorite grocery stores. That I'm occasionally putting a little bit of rye into this one. But you don't want to feed exclusively rye, because you'll notice when you put the rye flour in, it slows it down quite a bit. It's going to take it some time to digest that. There is a couple other things I'm going to mention. Ambient temperature. We're probably somewhere around 65 to 68 degrees at night, and we're probably closer to 70 degrees in the day, especially when I'm baking bread. So I'm not worried about it because I'm here in California, but if your ambient temperature is definitely not coming up to the 70-degree range, then what you want to do is place your starter in the oven. Leave the light turned on, because the light bulb will create some warmth and the oven will insulate it. Do that overnight. Just make sure you remember to take your starter out of the oven before you turn it on. You might need to put a sign on the oven Also, you can place your starter on top of your refrigerator where the heat rises, and the refrigerator does produce a little bit of heat. This is what you have to look forward to if you get a good healthy starter. These are loaves of bread that I baked last night. Nice hard crusts. They're just, oh my gosh. I've only made now a half a dozen loaves of bread in my entire life, just in the last week. I'd never made bread before about a week and a half ago. I'd never even thought to try to, sort of a passing thought. Hey, I should try to make bread one day. Nope, I'm doing it. I just figured it out and I'm doing it. And it's that easy. But you need a sourdough starter if you're going to do sourdough.